Hey weirdos, this is Evan Jarvix with Make Oklahoma Weirder, and it is Friday morning, time for another local music vlog, if you will, and I'm going to start off with some bullet points on Make Oklahoma Weirder on that front, because there's some news there. I was on a podcast this week, which is pretty fun. I haven't been on too many of those, but Local Lights OKC is a great podcast. I've been listening to them kind of off and on since they started. They're a little bit over a year old now, but they're a part of the KOSU Spy Network, which there isn't a whole lot of podcasting there yet, but I know it's something that they're kind of getting the ball rolling on, and Local Lights has been really consistent. If you're not familiar with the podcast, they basically they talk about all the goings-on in Oklahoma City, especially concerning social events or art events or foodie events. I know they're a big fan of the bar culture that we have. They have a lot of guests from these different restaurants and these different organizations. One of their recent episodes was all about the streetcar. I got to be the guest on one of those episodes. So if you go to the Local Lights page, you can find them at, they have a website, they're on the Spy, all social media, Local Lights OKC, and the podcast is on pretty much every platform. I like to listen to it on SoundCloud. I think it's the most accessible way, but if you're an Apple user, I know they're on Apple Music and so on and so forth. But I wanted to mention that because there's an episode where I am the featured guest. It's, they do their whole thing where they talk about what they did during the week and then what's coming up on the next week and all of that. And then they have their guest. And so then I did an interview with them. And so Make Oklahoma Weirder was the featured organization for this particular episode. So it's fun. I got to talk about, why I do what I do and what exactly I do for Make Oklahoma Weirder. It is still a growing thing. I mean, it's something I've just kind of been working on in my spare time pretty consistently for the past 6 months or so. And I have a lot of plans for it. But you got to take things one day at a time. Since I finally got a website last month, we finally made this happen. So I was able to be a guest on this podcast. But what I want to point out is that if you listen to it, I also talk about my Big 50, which is coming out next week, which is another point that I want to bring up. The Big 50, if you haven't seen or heard of it, you can go to makeoklahomaweirder.com, and there is a tab for the Big 50. If you go under the blog, it'll be right there. It says Jarvix's Big 50. You can also Google it. If you Google it, you'll probably get the old Cellar Door URL. But I've ported all that stuff over from the old Cellar Door website to Make Oklahoma Weirder. If you don't know, I used to write for Cellar Door Music Group, where I did the Big 50 for 2 years before. And so this is my third year doing it. But I provide an explanation on there, and then you can look at the past couple years and kind of get a feel for what it is. But I talk about it on the podcast, and basically it's my year-end countdown. Everybody does one, top albums of the year, top releases of the year. But in my case, I try to break it out a little bit differently. It's 50 individual music releases, but it's spread out across albums, EPs, and single releases. And so I go into a little bit more detail about that and why I do that and what it entails. But that's coming up next week. I start rolling it out on Christmas Eve, and it runs all the way through that week. So that's going to be 50, not just, a list, but I actually do a full review for every single release. So it's thousands and thousands of words I've written for this thing, and I'm continuing to write as I rush to put the finishing touches on it. The Big 50 is dropping, and if you listen to the episode, we also spoil a few that made the cut. So I brought a dartboard on this episode, and we threw darts, and wherever they landed helped determine which artist I would happen to reveal. So if you missed it, listen to the podcast, And I will go ahead and name names on this because it's dropping Monday. It'll be out pretty soon, and I've already tagged these artists on social media. So if you follow really closely, you've already seen this. But we revealed that my number 8 single of the year is a single called "Cursed" by a band called Fester out of Tulsa. A lot of you probably have never heard of Fester. Honestly, I didn't know about them until a few months ago, but really solid if you're into kind of heavy metal, death metal, hardcore kind of stuff. It's a really good track, and the EP that we ended up getting was the number 2 EP of the year, which goes out to Medicine, who I've mentioned before, but who I absolutely would love to mention again. Also out of the Tulsa area, but Medicine has been really coming up really fast, I think. I think a lot of people really see the talent in this guy as a producer, as a engineer, as a songwriter. He can do a lot of things. He's proven himself to be versatile, and he's put out 2 projects this year, and I've just been really impressed with what he's done. Kind of a bit from the alternative R&B camp, that's what they're calling it. I don't think that's a very good genre name, but that's kind of what I characterize some of his work as. Like if you're into The Weeknd and stuff like that, like he's got some good stuff for you. Especially on this particular project that I picked, which I can't remember the number, 918 something /918, but it'll be on the 50. And then Johnny Manchild also got a shout out, being the number 5 LP of the year. And if you don't know Johnny Manchild by now, you can wait until Friday to hear about it. But I've talked about Johnny Manchild over and over here in the vlog because he's just consistently one of the most exciting up and coming talents in Oklahoma, like without a doubt. And people are finally catching on. The Local Lights people hadn't heard of the other 2 artists, but they had heard of Johnny Manchild, but they didn't hear about him until this past year. Not until he released that single over the summer. So kind of amazing who can fly under everybody's radar. Because I've been hip to Johnny Manchild for at least 2 years. Anyway. What was I going to say after that? Local Lights. I've spent almost my whole time talking about Local Lights, but I've also talked about the Big 50. I think you've gotten a feel for kind of what that is. That's dropping next week. Going to be a big deal. And if you have any questions about it, if you're on Instagram right now, today, on Friday, I've actually posted a question that says, hey, do you have any questions about this Big 50? Feel free to let me know. I'll answer them to the best of my ability. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Also, I'm going to be on a podcast next week, for what it's worth. I'm not really going to talk that much about Make Oklahoma Weirder, but I am going to promote it alongside the Big 50, if I recall. I did the episode about a month ago or so, but I'm going to be on the Praise Down with Heath and Alex for a special Christmas episode where we're going to talk about the podcast has to do with Christian music culture, which is always an interesting topic. So we're going to look at a Christian Christmas music album. But okay, so spent all my time talking about that. I do want to mention a whole bunch of releases came out the past week or two. I didn't really get to talk much about it last week because I spent my time talking about video series and whatnot, but shout out to Husbands. Husbands just dropped an EP out of nowhere. I can't remember what it's called. Carlsdad or something. Carlstad. But Husbands has a new EP coming right off of having new singles this year already. There's a new Fresh EP coming out next week. It's kind of coming out of nowhere, but I got the notice on that this week that Fresh, if you don't follow the rapper Fresh, he's one of the best talents in the city, in the state. Been a big fan of Fresh for the past few years, so please look out for that. New single came out from Rousey. They've got an album coming out next month. New single came out from D-Boy, Don't Blink or You'll Die. If you're into chiptune music, he's got an album coming out next month. There's a lot of music that dropped all of a sudden, so I just wanted to shout it.